G'day everyone, my name is Hoi, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make luminosity masks. I'm going to show you the traditional way of making it and then some alternative ways of doing it, and maybe those ways will fit into your workflow a little bit better. Before I do that, I want to talk about what is a luminosity mask and why you would want to use one. And before I do that, I want to talk about what is a mask in the first place. I'm going to use this image for this tutorial. The link is also in the description if you want to follow along, although this isn't really a follow along tutorial, it's more of a watch and learn. So what is a mask? A mask is a layer that hides contents or show contents depending on what you paint on top of it. If I press B on my keyboard, I'm going to invoke my brush tool and I'm going to create a layer mask by pressing on this layer mask icon, and then just make sure that black is my foreground color. At the moment it's background color, so I'm going to select this toggle switch here, or I could have pressed X on my keyboard. And I'm just going to make sure that my mask is selected by clicking on it and then just paint on top of this. And because I've got black as my foreground color, it's hiding the contents of my picture here. Now this is non-destructive, as in it's not actually damaging the image here. So if I turn off the effects of the mask here by pressing Shift and then click, my picture is still preserved. It's the layer mask that is hiding the picture here. So if I select my solid color from my adjustment layer icon and then just select something like this magenta color, click and drag to the bottom of this, I can see that the underlying layer is here. Now if I want to reveal the contents of the image, again what I can do is select white as my foreground color just by pressing this or pressing X on my keyboard and just making sure that my mask is selected, and then I can paint over this. I've still got black as my foreground color, so let's turn that into white again and then just reveal it back again. So that is what a mask is. So the next question is, what is a luminance mask or luminosity mask? Well, it's very similar, but instead of me manually painting black or white on the layer mask, it's using the luminance or the brightness of the image to make that mask. Just going to delete all these so we can start from the beginning, and I'm just going to go to my channels panel. If you don't see your channels panel, you can go up to window and then just make sure that channels is selected. I'm just going to load the selection by pressing Command or Control and then click on the RGB channel. What that does is select the bright areas of these pictures, which you can see from the marching ants here. I'm going to go back to my layers panel here, and then I'm just going to make a adjustment layer. Just for fun, I'm going to make a hue saturation adjustment layer, and you can see that the mask is made out of the luminance of the selection. So if I press Option and then click on the layer mask, I can see it in a bigger view here. So remember, white reveals and black conceals. So if I apply an adjustment to that, you'll see most of the effect will be applied on the white areas and it will be concealed on the black area. Let's demonstrate that by going back to the hue saturation icon and then just change any color that I want. So let's change it to some pinkish color here just to exaggerate the difference. You can see that the areas that are shaded in white in the layer mask has the effect applied to it. Where it's black or dark, it's not applied to it. So that's why you would use a luminosity mask instead of simply painting over it. So if I just view the layer mask again, there is no way that I can paint this delicately, this intricately by just using the brush tool. So now let's go through how you would make one. So I've just given you a sneak peek of how you could make one, but there are nuances here where you can select your highlights or your dark or your midtones. So I'm going to disable the visibility of this here, so I've only got this showing here. Go back up to my channels panel here. Now I don't really want this layer mask, so I'm just going to delete it so we can start from the beginning. And I'm going to create the layer mask or luminosity mask for the bright areas. So as I did before, I'm going to press Command, click on this, and before you do anything, do not deselect it. And I'm going to make a channel out of this, or a luminosity mask out of this, by pressing on this mask icon, and that will create the mask based on this luminosity mask. Again, do not deselect. What we want to do now is select the bright areas of these already bright areas here. So we need to make an intersection of these selection. I'm going to press on my keyboard Command Option Shift, that's Control Alt Shift, and then click on this mask here, and then that will show, or that will select, the bright areas of the previously bright areas already. So with that selection selected, let's click on the layer mask again, and let's do that again to select the even brighter areas. So let's click on that, press Command Option Shift, your cursor will change into this X icon here, and then just click on this Alpha 2 channel, and that will select the bright areas. If you're on a PC, that was Control Alt Shift, and then click on that layer mask there, and then just make another mask here, or another channel. Now you can see that it's getting progressively darker, because what it's doing is selecting the bright areas of the bright areas of the bright areas. Now you can do that to infinity. Not that not that you probably want to, but just show you that you can select the brightest of the bright areas. Now, just for good housekeeping, I should have renamed this so we can keep track of it. So double click on that, put lights, or light 1, light 2, and then light 3. Now, that is selecting all the bright areas. Now let's select the dark areas now. You can see that I've got the channel selected, so I'm going to deselect that by pressing Command or Control D, and then let's create the dark areas. So it's a very similar process, but the first step is a little different. So I'm going to press on this RGB channel again, and I'm going to press Command and then click, and then what I want to do is not select the bright areas, but the dark areas. So I want to inverse my selection. I can do that by pressing Command Shift I. That's Control Shift I if you're on a PC. Let's make a mask here, and then that is our channel. With this channel selected, let's intersect that. Who can remember how to do it? It's a pretty long shortcut. So it's Command Option Shift, and then click on this. That's Control Alt Shift if you're on a PC, and then click on your layer mask here, and that will select even the dark areas of those dark areas. Now let's just repeat that one more time to sort of cement that knowledge in our heads. So with the Alpha 2 channel selected, let's press Command Option Shift, that's Control Alt Shift, and then click on this Alpha 2. That will select even the dark areas, and then click on this mask icon here. So here you can keep going, and you can select the darkest of the dark areas again. So I'm going to stop at 3 levels, and I'm just going to rename that so we can keep track of it. So dark 1. Now the next step I want to show you is to make the same luminosity mask but for the midtone. So I'm going to deselect that by pressing Command or Control D on the keyboard. So to make the midtone luminosity mask, what we have to do is go back up to our RGB channel here, and instead of pressing Command, click on this, I'm going to select the whole canvas by pressing Command or Control A. That will give you this marching ants around the perimeter. I'm going to have to subtract from this selection the light areas as well as the dark areas. Let's press Command and Option on the keyboard. That's Control and Alt on our keyboard. Our cursor will change into this minus sign. Let's click once on this light area here, and then with Command Option still selected on my keyboard, or still pressed on my keyboard, that's Control Alt if you're on a PC. Let's click on this dark one, and then it will give us a warning say no pixels are more than 50% selected. Don't worry, it's still selecting the pixels. It's just showing that for pixels that are not 50% selected, it means that you're not going to see marching ants around it. So we're okay with that. So let's press OK. And then let's press this mask icon here, and let's just see what we've done. So this is a mid-tone luminosity mask. So before we go on to the next step, let's just rename that to mid-tone. Press return on our keyboard. So now that we've got all our luminosity masks using the traditional way, what we can do is now make the adjustment. Let's just say I want this hazy fog here to change color. So what I can do is select which of these luminosity masks I want to use so I can apply the effects on it. So I want to apply the effect on this layer 2 mask here. So I can press Command and click on this to load the selection. Click on this RGB channel and then go back to my layers channel and then create a hue saturation adjustment layer. And now I can simply change the hue of that image here. So you can see that because I've selected this luminosity mask here, it's only having an effect on the areas where it's white. Now, if I think that is too much, or if I think that I've selected the wrong luminosity mask, I can simply delete that or just turn off the visibility of that layer here and then select, say, this luminosity mask by pressing Command and then click on this and then go back up to my layers panel and then do the same thing. Now, the reason why this is red, this layer is red, is because I haven't returned it back to the RGB channel. So let's click once here and go back up to my layers and then create another hue saturation adjustment. And you can see that the mask is really dark because it's only selecting the brightest of the bright areas. So let's click on the hue saturation icon again, and then we can do the same thing. So the adjustments are very subtle. So I've scrubbed the hue slider all the way to the extremes and you can barely notice the difference. If I'm happy with that and want to lighten the dark areas, I can do similar things. I can go back up to the channels area and then choose the luminosity mask that I want to adjust. So let's say I want to adjust the lightness or brightness using this luminosity mask here. I can Command click on this. That's Control click if you're on a PC. Let's go back up to my layers panel here, and then because I want to change the luminosity or luminance of that channel, I can go to my curves adjustment layer. Now I made the same error that I did before. This is still red, so let's go back to my channel. Let's click on RGB and then go back up to our layers panel here and go up to curves here. And with this curves channel selected, let's just change the values here a bit. So increase the lightness in the dark areas. I'm just going to squash the midtones back to where it was. And you can see that the luminosity mask has done its job. So without the luminosity mask, it will apply this effect to the whole image. So if I disable the curves here by pressing Shift and click on this layer mask, you can see that it's lightened the whole thing. I'm just going to apply that again by pressing Shift and click on that. So you can see that luminosity mask is very powerful. You can make adjustments based on the luminance of that. But I've deliberately went through the whole step of creating this traditional luminosity mask just to give you a sense of the work and time that's required to create the luminosity mask. Let's show you a different approach, and that is using the select color range approach. I'm just going to go back to my layers panel, just going to deselect all this and make sure that my image is selected. Let's go up to select and go up to color range. Now what this will give you is some options where you can select different colors. So if I just want to select the reds in my color, yellows, etc., I can simply do that. But what we want to do is use these options here. I want to select my highlights, midtones, or shadow. So this gives you a very nice way of selecting these different shades, right? So let's just say I want to select my highlights. Now, if you don't see what I'm seeing here, that's because my selection preview is on grayscale here. So if you want to follow along, just make sure that you've got grayscale selected. Now we've got two sliders here, so let's just walk through how we can use this to our advantage. Starting off with the range, it just basically asks you, well, what tone of gray do you want to select? So if I want to select all the bright areas, the brightest of the bright areas, I can move it all the way to the right, and if I want to be less extreme, I can move it to the left. Now the fuzziness is kind of like your feather, you know, make the edges a bit softer. So if I exaggerate that a bit by moving it all the way somewhere like this, just keep an eye out on this edge here. If I move this slider here, the edge, maybe this edge is not a good example, but these edges here become softer, right? So you can think of fuzziness as kind of the feather or how soft it is. So let's just make a rough selection. So I want to select this haze here. Now remember, white on a mask is what will show. I'm just going to fuzz that up or feather that, something like this, and press OK. And I've got a selection here. Let's create a hue saturation adjustment layer. And now I can do exactly the same thing. Before I change the hue slider, let's just double click on this and remind ourselves this is the color range option. And now I can change the color. So you can see that this gives you a little bit more real-time selection of your luminosity mask. You're not relying on Photoshop to intersect things to your liking. Now, as you saw on the color range option, you could also select not only the highlights, but also the midtones and the shadows. So you can repeat that process depending on which area that you want to change or adjust. Now, as good as that is, I want to show you a different way of doing luminosity masks, and it's the option that I use more often than not, and that's using the blend if sliders. Again, I'm going to disable the visibility of this layer here, and I'm going to just click on that. Not that I'm going to do anything with this image here or this layer here. I'm just wanting to create a hue saturation adjustment layer on top of this layer, and that's my layer here. And before I go on, I'm just going to group all these into a folder just so it's nice and clean, so we don't get mixed up with what we're doing. And I'm going to double click on that and just rename that to blend if. You can see that this mask is empty or blank. I'm going to invoke our blend if sliders by double clicking on the empty area here. Don't click on the name, but click on the empty area and it will show up the layer style menu. Before we adjust the blend if sliders, which is here, what I want to do is show the area that we're going to be affecting. I'm going to click on this color overlay option here. I'm going to click on the word, not the checkbox here. Now I can click on the checkbox because I've already got the settings that I want. But if you simply click on this, it will just apply your existing settings. Let's click on the word here, and that will give you the options of changing it. Now the color that I want to show is a color that is not shown on the image, right? So if I have magenta on my image here, I don't want to choose magenta as my color overlay. And that's because when I move my blend if sliders, I want to see the effect that it's making. If I have the same color overlay as the colors in my image, then I won't be able to see the effect that I'm making. Let's just click on that. And if you don't have, say, magenta or any other different color, you can select this box here. This color picker will come up, and I've just got this magenta color, and press OK. I've got my blend mode as normal and opacity at 100. Let's go back up to our blending options here. And what we're going to do is play with our underlying layer slider here. Then that's because we're wanting to affect this layer here. This is underneath this layer here. So I'm just going to move this from the left to the right, and you can see instantly that the effect that it's having. Now remember, the magenta area is what will show up. This the adjustment. If I make an adjustment to it, it will be applied in the magenta areas here. So if I move it to the left, this white stop here, then it will have a similar effect on the highlight area. Now let's just go quickly over what it's doing here. It's saying that from here to here, so from the pure black to this tone of gray here, the tones from the underlying image will punch through. You'll be able to see that in our image here. So the similar effect happens on your bright point here, or your highlight point. So if I move it from here to here, it's saying that from bright white to this shade of gray, it will punch through from the underlying layer. Now you can see that if I move it from here to here, it's doing okay, but the edges are kind of harsh. So to feather the edges, I'm going to press Option or Alt on my keyboard, split that, and then I can feather that out, and then just make my adjustment here. And similarly, I can do it for my white point. Just look at my white areas, press Option or Alt on my keyboard, and then just feather that out as much as we like. I can see in real time what I'm affecting. So once I'm happy with it, I'm going to press OK. And then to make the adjustment, the hue adjustment, I'm going to turn off my color overlay effect by pressing on this icon here. And then I can adjust my hue slider. The great thing about this is that it's not a pixel based mask. So what does that mean? It means that if I want to change the luminosity mask of this, I don't have to create another luminosity mask. I can double click on this layer here to invoke my layer style menu here, and then simply adjust the areas again, right? And then that will change my selection. Now that looks a little bit awful, but that's not the point of this tutorial. It's just to say, okay, I can change in a dynamic way what it's selecting, my luminosity mask, right? So now I can change it to a greenish color here. Now you might say, okay, well, how do I fix this dark areas here? I can create another adjustment layer, this time a curves adjustment layer here, and then do the same thing. So double click on the empty area here and create a color overlay. Now because I've got the settings that I want from previous, I can simply check this checkbox here and then play around with these sliders here, right? So remember, the areas in purple are what will show or what will let the adjustment through. So if I split this white tab here, remember Option or Alt and click on the tab, that will split your tabs. So that will give you a view of what I'm selecting. So this looks good to me. I'm going to press OK, and now I can adjust my curves. So again, I'm going to just lighten the dark areas. So I'm not seeing the effect here because I've still got my color overlay effect here. So I've just turned that off, and let's just reset that just so you can see it. So click and then drag it up. Now that's having an impact on the rest of the image. So I'm just going to move that down here, and I can adjust it however I like. So this is before, and this is after changing the luminance or the bright areas of the dark areas. And then this is changing the hue or the color of the fog there. So the benefits of using the blend if sliders instead of using a pixel based luminosity mask is, as I say, you're not confined to just that pixel mask here. So if I want to adjust my adjustment ever so slightly, I don't have to create another luminance mask. I can simply just go back into our layer styles and then adjust the blend if. The other reason that you might want to use the blend if option is that it will create a smaller file. Because these are not a pixel based mask, it's just using instructions, right? So these are just the instructions that Photoshop is using to create the effect. It's not storing each and every pixel in its file. So that's why it will create a smaller file. The other thing is that because it's instructions, it will apply the same instructions no matter what file you use. So if I import another image here by going to File, Place Embedded, and select an image, just accept that, and then place this beneath all my layer settings here, then it's going to apply the same effect on whatever image that I have. I don't need to create another pixel-based luminosity mask. If I use these options here, then I would have to create different luminosity masks, because this luminosity mask is specific to this image here. So you can see that I've applied this luminosity mask, which is the picture of the man in the forest, to the image of this forest here. You can see that it's applying that here. So for every adjustment that I want to make, or for every picture that I want to have the effect on, I have to create a separate luminosity mask. So that's good for if you have lots of images that you want to apply the same settings, and that's why you would use the blend diff sliders. So that's how you make luminosity masks using the traditional way, the color range, as well as the blend diff. Now, in my opinion, there is no right or wrong ways. The traditional way is not better or worse than the color range way or the blend diff way, and vice versa. It just depends on your workflow and what you're used to, or if it works for what you want to do. So the purpose of this tutorial is simply to show you a number of ways, just so you can have all these techniques in your arsenal. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this video, make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, and hit the bell icon so you can get notified for when the next video is out.